This is an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company in co-production with Wessler Media.
I have a collect call from
Cliff.
an inmate at Mahoning County Justice Center.
They won't let my mom out. They put her on a parole violation. They won't let her out until she testifies at my trial, or if I take a plea deal, they'll let her out. I mean, I don't even know how that's possible or legal. They violated my proffer agreement. You can't use my proffer as evidence against me. That's why they're fucking with my mom. That's the only way to get to me. And they know by fucking with my mom, it's not just my mom, it's my dad. He shouldn't even really be alone, at all. Can't take care of himself. If my mom doesn't get out, they're gonna lose the house. Between a rock and a hard place. That's Youngstown.
Welcome to episode 7 of Operation Stolen Base, the true story behind one of the most extensive sports memorabilia fraud schemes of all time. My name is Johnny Ciccatelli. In our last episode, we heard from Assistant Mahoning County Prosecutor Marty Desmond about the state's case against Cliff Panizich and the breakdown between both sides after the sentencing recommendation in Cliff's plea deal is changed from 3 to 7 years to 5 to 7 years. The story you're going to hear in this episode is one you've already heard, but this time from Cliff's perspective. Chapter 7, No More Outs.
So we're almost 2 years in its entirety from the moment they raid my house to when we finally reach a plea deal. Actually, it's just a little over 2 years. I have my attorney, Percy Squire, been an attorney 40 years. And, not that it's comforting to me, but the quote that always keeps coming out of his mouth is, I've never seen a prosecutor's office do a family so wrong as they're doing yours. It's not because I'm innocent, but it's, all these tactics they use to obtain a plea deal, where is the line drawn?
If we could just start with you saying your name and tell us who you are.
My name is Percy Squire. That's spelled P-E-R-C-Y, S-Q-U-I-R-E. I'm a lawyer. I'm licensed in the state of Ohio, and I practice throughout the state.
All right, so if I say Cliff Panizich, what comes to mind?
Operation Stolen Base. Critical events had occurred by the time I came into the case. And it was my impression very early on in Cliff's case that his rights were being abused. Unfortunately, what happens in many jurisdictions, and not just Youngstown, is that in order to keep their dockets moving, techniques are used to coerce guilty pleas. And that while I understand the importance of settlement negotiations and the need to not waste time on trials where there's guilt, there are still certain procedures, there's a certain method that should be followed where the constitutional rights of individuals are not violated in order to compel them to plead guilty. And most of my concern in Cliff's case was that I thought his rights were being violated. When I came into the case, he had already given a proffer. A proffer is an offer basically of evidence. And there can be plea negotiations conducted, and an offer can be made because of the cooperation of the person providing this evidence.
I sit down, for what they call a proffer statement, which was basically my cooperation. I gave them all the information. Fast forward to roughly April, Marty's finally ready to go along for the arraignment. He sends over the official offer sheet that needs to be signed. When Marty sends over the offer sheet, it's now been changed to a 5 to 7 year plea deal.
The difference is when you are eligible for judicial release. Judicial release is after an individual who had been sentenced to a period of confinement, the sentencing judge can go back and put them on probation. Here it's called judicial release. They can go back and let the person out. And if the minimum is 3, then you're eligible for judicial release at a given point in time, like 18 months or 6 months. If it's 4 or more, then you're eligible for judicial release at a much later time.
In Ohio at the time, a 5-year sentence to become eligible for a judicial release, you had to serve at least 5 years. In my mind, it just changed from the potential of doing 6 months to not the potential of, but having to do 5 years.
And that was the critical difference, because he was told at the time the proffer was given that it was going to be the 3 to 7.
Once again, the prosecutor in this case, Marty Desmond.
In the letter, we had put 5 to 7. We do hundreds of these a year. That's a mistake, probably because of my handwriting. I said, we'll correct it. Cliff, and I think Cliff was just looking for a way out. He said, no, they weren't honest with me. I'm done. He's just got this thought in his mind that, he was somehow screwed by the system, which is just completely ludicrous.
When he originally sent the document and it said 5 to 7, and I backed out of the agreement, Anthony Sano, the FBI agent, on a recorded phone call while I was in Henderson Detention Center, tried to convince me that the 3 to 7 was a typo and it was supposed to say 5 to 7. So you have Anthony Sano lying on one side, Marty Desmond lying on the other side. They got the information they needed out of me by offering this 3 to 7.
He made decisions predicated upon the offer being 3 to 7 years. It was not his error. And if he relied on that in divulging incriminating information, that was the whole problem throughout this case.
Percy all along called it a bait and switch, which is absolutely what it was.
It's funny that you mentioned bait and switch, because Marty accuses you of baiting and switching, of sitting down and making sure your mom is getting the best deal and then you reneging on the deal.
Cliff all along wanted to make sure that you had a deal and everything was in place for you. And even when he came in and gave his statement, he wouldn't necessarily talk about your involvement. And you get the deal that you wanted, which we based a lot of that on the fact that Cliff was going to be pleading, and he doesn't. Just seems, from me kind of looking at this with a shaded eye, like we've been kind of played this whole time.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that, because while Marty accuses me of bait and switching, he actually does it again. So we get another deal where my mom gets probation. I plead guilty to a 3 to 7 year plea deal. My mom goes back, pleads guilty, gets sentenced, gets probation. I go back to plead guilty to a 3 to 7 year plea deal. We go into the courtroom and it's 5 to 7 again. So Marty's still on this 5 to 7. So while he wants to allude to the fact that I bait and switched him into giving my mom probation, he did it. He put it on the record. It's in the court minutes.
Listen to me. 3 to 7 was with you cooperating. You never cooperated.
Yeah, but when you say he wasn't cooperating, that was when he went into court to plead. He said, this isn't the deal.
Marty goes on this egotistical, lunatic type rant in the courtroom about he offered this, he offered that, I turned this down, but none of it was really offered. The only thing ever offered was 5 to 7. He actually put offers on the record that never made it to me. Like, I never got offered a 4-year, 11-month plea deal, but it's on the record in the court minutes.
What else did he do that was a lack of cooperation? The only thing he didn't do that they wanted him to do was to walk in and plead guilty. And he wouldn't do it because the deal did not reflect the proffer. When they're saying he wasn't cooperating, I'm not sure what they're alleging he did.
We had received information that someone working on Cliff's behalf was reaching out to these other individuals, trying to get them to withdraw their guilty pleas, and that Cliff's lawyer would represent them, and that if they all stuck together, the case would crumble. Jason Moore had pled he was going to cooperate. Well, around that same time that we learned that they were being reached out to, that's when Jason Moore comes along and says, I'm not cooperating.
Marty's insinuating that Cliff was contacting co-defendants in an attempt to get them to drop their guilty pleas, with Jason Moore being the only one who was duped into it. But I asked Jason what happened.
I pled guilty to charges because my attorney told me it was the best thing to do. He was very unhelpful in preparing me for anything. And he would not communicate and tell me what exactly was going on. I didn't know what some of these charges meant that I'd pled out to. So just talking through some guys in the jail, I found out that I had the option to have my plea removed. In layman's terms, though, the reason why I decided to do that is because I really didn't know what was going on. They coerce you into doing these things. They make you feel good about making a decision, even though you have no clue what you just signed. And I just wanted to be sure I was making the right decision. So I put in a motion to withdraw my plea, and I put in a motion to have new counsel appointed to me.
Even though the fact that he bait and switched me, he shouldn't have let my mom come back and get the probation first. And that's what he was upset about, because he was mad at himself that he let her plead out and get probation before he had me completely on the hook. So on the back end, how does he handle that? He fabricates a probation violation.
Cliff's mother, Rose Panizich.
Sarah Kavar was my first attorney. Originally, she said that she kept telling them absolutely under no circumstances will she ever take a deal that includes testifying against her son, which was my stance the whole time. I don't care what else I have to do. I'm not saying anything against Cliff. The day we're in court, Marty added it in pencil underneath my deal, and it goes to the judge with that added, that I will testify. So I get back to Ohio, and they arrest me on a probation violation. Well, what was my violation?
She was going to get a deal for cooperation, but she was supposed to meet with the FBI and the Canfield Police and go through everything, give a statement. When it comes time for her to meet with them, she refuses to meet with them. And through her attorney tells us she's going to say that he didn't do anything wrong.
When I was supposed to go testify at the grand jury, my brother was there, so that's a witness. I showed up to testify at the grand jury. Marty said to me, I'm not putting you on the stand because I think you'll lie. And he said, I'm calling your probation officer. So he called her. We can only assume that he said, I violated my probation by not testifying. But with witnesses, you said you're not putting me on the stand because you think I will lie. Well, now that you're a mind reader and you know that I'm going to do something, you could have me arrested for it.
Hello, Laura.
Oh, there you are. Hello. Yes.
Oh my God, I was arrested. I'm in county jail. This is the words I was told. The judge ordered my arrest for probation violation. And then I was told my hearing will probably be Tuesday morning, which then coincides with Cliff. So obviously this is just a setup. It says that if I violate parole, she could put me in for the 7 years. I'm not real hopeful because, like I said, I know I read that paper. So I just figure 7 years now.
Cliff looked at I guess the arrest warrant or whatever it was, how they arrested you, and there's nothing on it. You didn't lie. You were never brought to grand jury. So.
Well, you know how they get anything they want, though. Everything changes along the way. I said I wanted, all this in writing to begin with. Oh, yeah.
One of the things I understood had been agreed to when she pleaded initially was that she was not going to have to testify against Cliff. This promise, however, was made during a telephone call.
Would you say they went against their agreement with her?
They allege that there never was an agreement that she would not have to testify against Cliff.
But that's what Cliff and his mother were under the impression of.
Right. When Cliff wouldn't plead, They had his mom come testify before the grand jury. She actually never even made it to the grand jury. When they prepped her, they didn't like what she was proposing to say, and they put her in jail as having violated her probation.
Tell me what I lied about. You keep saying I'm lying about this stuff, but like what? Brian and Marty come in and some other guy who I didn't know, and Brian's like insistent that I ain't getting out of jail because he said she lied to a federal agent. She's serving time and blah blah. And then Marty comes in and the whole spiel, and then they all left the room and went in another room and talking. I could hear them, and I heard Judge Sweeney say she isn't getting out.
At one point in time, she was in the jury room awaiting a hearing, and she heard Judge Maureen Sweeney kind of slam a door and walk out of her chambers. She said, "I'm sick of this case. She can just sit in jail." So that's the take on the probation violation hearing. Never goes in front of the judge. The day before her PV hearing, it gets continued by Marty Desmond. It's never reset. So she never has a probation violation hearing. She never went in front of the judge. In the meantime, I get indicted on my 7 additional felony charges. You know, I hear it all the time. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's the favorite comment that I hear nowadays. But you look at the situation and what was I guilty of? Is it really racketeering?
The RICO characterization of the activity I thought was a stretch. One of our first meetings was whether or not what the state alleged had occurred constituted an enterprise, a racketeering enterprise. And I didn't at that point, and I still don't.
They kind of spin it like, hey, I'm up here and all this money filters up. Prosecution, everything kind of makes it sound like we had this banker on standby that we paid, but it's really not. Like, everybody ran their own thing.
The definitions of what constitutes an enterprise, whether it is sufficient in continuity and longevity and so forth, these are kind of judge-made rules. So it's a shade of gray. It's not a clear black and white. But when I looked at this, it did not seem to me that this constituted an enterprise. I understood what they said happened. I looked at what was going on, but it looked to me like this was just a random assortment. People knew that Cliff had this talent, and so you had just various people coming to him. That was the way it appeared to me.
One of my co-defendants, his involvement was I'd be drunk at his house on a Saturday night, and he'd come walking out of the bedroom with buckets of baseballs and give me some sob story about how he lost at poker at the casino and he's got to make his house payment. Can I sign these 200 baseballs for him? And the answer would always be yes. So there's no criminal organization. You know, really, they had me in a bind as to where I couldn't say no because, you know, they obviously had the ultimate power on me as they could go tell, which they did.
Cliff is not here, but he's fine.
Where is he? Is he in jail too?
He turned himself in this morning, and Percy told him to, and that he's supposed to get a bond hearing either today or tomorrow. And Cliff has it set up, you know, with the bondsman that they'll be there to get him out. And the bondsman said they will cover it, so he's not worried about that.
So now I'm back in jail. I turn myself in. I'm back in jail. My bail gets raised from $100,000 to $500,000. So now Marty's in front of the judge, and in this bail hearing, I'm the biggest flight risk he's ever seen. I'm a threat to the community. I'll flee. Even though I've came back for 3 separate court hearings and I turned myself in after the indictment, I'm the biggest flight risk he's ever seen. $500,000 bail.
What happened? You don't know.
They raised his bond, his bail.
How much?
$500,000.
I'll never get out. Oh my God. Oh my God. No. Oh my God.
In open court on 2 occasions, Marty said he confessed. The proffer is a voluntary statement that is supposed to be protected in the event that for some reason there's a later breakdown and there's no plea agreement entered into.
Marty keeps saying I confessed in court. That's what he uses to get my bail so high. He can't use my proffer as evidence against me. One of the guys that works in a jailhouse here is like, yeah, you probably could have killed somebody and got a lower bail than that. I was sitting in a cell on a dude that's in here for an F1 aggravated murder, facing life, and his bail was $500,000. Like, no shit. In the same cell with this dude.
Why was a person free on $50,000 bond all of a sudden required to post 10 times more? He hadn't engaged in any additional activity. The community was not threatened by his presence. That was done to coerce him.
As Cliff works his way through the bowels of the justice system in Mahoning County, there's another case unfolding, which is a prime example of how unbalanced the system can be.
Simultaneously, there's a child rape case going on in front of Judge Maureen Sweeney. This man's bail is $250,000.
It was actually just $100,000.
Sweeney hit him with $100,000. He gets out on house arrest and then kills those people. Yeah, that was Sweeney.
While he's out on house arrest, he murders the little girl and her grandparents. He gets put back in jail, and going in front of the judge, he files to be allowed to appear in civilian clothing and without restraints, and it gets approved. My bail, again on a nonviolent white-collar sports memorabilia case, is $500,000 to start, and when I file to show up in civilian clothing and without restraints, I get denied. And we're going in front of the same judge at the same time, just have different prosecutors.
Cliff's not making any of that up. And if you're wondering how that case ended, the accused child rapist and triple murderer who the judge allowed to walk the halls without restraints took his own life when he ran down a 4th floor hallway and leapt off the balcony, squashing himself like a bug on the busy rotunda. So why did the court impose such high bail and strict procedures with Cliff?
The real reason is just because they want to get me stuck in here. Like, that's it. They think I'll take this stupid ass deal if I'm stuck in here. Especially because my mom's in here.
All right, I'm going to put on my prosecutor's hat here and say, what's wrong with leveraging family and friends and everything you have against you to get a plea? Isn't that the prosecutor using all the tools at his disposal?
Okay, so we can go down 2 different paths with this about leveraging family and one. I think we're talking 2 separate things. If we're talking about maybe leveraging a family member that was involved, like my mother, because she did have some involvement. But the leveraging of my mother wasn't directed at my mother. It was directed at my father's health care. My dad was really in not great health for a long time.
Frank had gotten, I still say everything, his illnesses were from Agent Orange. The VA doesn't agree with us. But he had a lot of illnesses and was a lot of surgeries. He was sick for a lot of years. Frank had like a lot of intestinal problems with Crohn's, and he had gallbladder trouble, esophagus. I mean, he had numerous surgeries, but that was a lot of years of being sick.
Coming from a family where my parents never missed games, there were times where he couldn't travel, couldn't be at games. You know, the biggest part of it is, my father was, looked like a healthy guy, was my size, 6'1", roughly 200 pounds. And after kind of the onset of his diagnosis, he kind of withered away over time to where you could kind of see his bones, see his skin.
How was his health when you decided to move to Las Vegas?
It was manageable. My mom was basically his caretaker, and that's really her involvement in the operation, is that, gave her jobs to do with the operation so that she could stay home and be the caretaker of both my grandmother and my father. Probably after about 2 years out there, he started suffering early onset dementia. There was a chance he had some kidney cancer. So it really snowballed towards the end. The worst moment I remember is, I don't even know how to describe it other than mentally, it was just like he was gone and couldn't do anything. And I don't know what clicked or exactly how it happened that day, but I was like he didn't know me or my mother, and he wasn't able to function. And he's like 68 at the time, and he wasn't able to dress himself. And in my mind, I'm trying to be calm, like to keep him calm, but I'm frantic because in my mind, I'm like, you know, is this how it happens? Like you wake up one day and you're gone and never come back. You know, that was really a wake-up call as to like, you know, this is really the health he's in, and any day I could wake up and, you know, him not even know who I am anymore.
Did you ever have a conversation with him after the raid about what was going on?
I mean, there were some. I mean, how do you mean, like as?
Let me back it up. Was he aware of the memorabilia fraud?
Sorry, man, you got me in a bad place right now, for real. Give me a second. We gotta take a break.
Coming up in the final episode of Operation Stolen Base, Cliff goes before the judge to learn his fate, but not before Marty Desmond, the prosecutor in the case, loses his job. This episode of Operation Stolen Base was written by me, Johnny Ciccatelli. Story editing, mixing, and sound design by Kevin Skuback. Produced by Vince Tornero and myself. Our theme song is Chasin' by the Vindies.
That was an amazing podcast from an amazing podcast company in co-production with Wessler Media. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a review. It goes a long way in helping more people find the show.